So as far as, whether it's safety, drivers, you got the DOT regulations, FMCSA, a lot of regulations out there. Obviously, hazmat adds another layer of regulations on that. Again, whether it's safety record, crash, and inspection records, you guys are doing amazing. How do you look at FMCSA? What's your perspective with those, with the organization and with regulations in general?
So the way we approach regulations is this. Being compliant doesn't make you safe. Being compliant only makes you compliant.
Correct.
The reason you are compliant is not because you're worried about an audit or a government group coming in to see you. Like the FMCSA or OSHA or anybody, they can come audit us tomorrow. I fear no audit. Yeah. What the worst that can happen in that situation is they come in, they find a few things, they write us up a fine, and we fix it and we move on. Yeah. But it does not interrupt our ability to operate. In my experience with audits, particularly with FMCSA, is once they get in there and see that you're doing most of it right and you're trying really hard to make sure you do it right, you're not their target. They move on quickly to somebody. They want the outlaw. They're looking for that company. So because of that, we don't really fear them. But we comply for really a different reason. And the reason we have to be compliant is if we're not compliant, that puts us at risk for litigation, right? I mean, we fear plaintiffs' attorneys. We don't fear them, but we dread them, so to speak. And that's the reason to be compliant, because when you're not compliant, if a plaintiff attorney gets a hold of that, then they can shut us down. They can keep us from being able to get insurance. They can make us negligent. And if we have one of these nuclear verdicts with a huge amount of, punitive damages are not insurable. Right. So that your company's getting the checkbook out and writing that. I mean, compensatory damages, that your insurance is going to cover that, depending on what your coverage is and how much the damages are. But the punitive damages, you're paying those. And that's going to stop your ability to operate. It could potentially stop your ability to operate. So we comply. It's obviously the right thing to do, but we comply because that keeps us, that mitigates our risk. We don't comply because, people go all the time. I hear people say, "Oh, we better do that. You might get audited." Audit me. Come on. I don't care. Bring it on. And it's not that, we want to tempt fate with them. We love you. FMCSA auditors. But the fact of the matter is that's not where the real risk for us lies. So when we comply, that's the approach we take. We learn and the other thing that we say, and I tell this to drivers in our training, and I say it all the time, do not try to logic your way through the regulations. And the reason is the regulations don't make logical sense. A different group of people make them, they grow, they change as political parties change in the White House and appointed positions change at the DOT. The direction of the regulations can change, and it moves slowly, but it does move over time. Yeah. And if you're out there working, you think, well, it seems like this would be the right regulation, you're going to do something wrong and be out of compliance. And most of the time it happens because Matt would look at it as a tanker guy or a guy hauling beer, and he doesn't realize that when a regulator writes that rule, they have to write it for everybody. And so it's going to be written in a much more broad or different perspective. And so don't try to figure the regulations out or use logic to be compliant. What you need to do is learn the rules, don't question them, because that's just going to drive you nuts, and then play by them. And that's what we do.
And obviously, one of the things we preach is proactive safety. So it's not only are the rules there, that's like the base minimum, really, for safety.
That's the baseline.
And especially when it comes to whether it's insurance or when it comes to litigation, they're not looking at, are you complying with the base minimum? You should be, and that's fine. They'll find something else to complain. Why aren't you doing what everybody else is doing? Like, hey, bigger fleets will have cameras. Luckily, you guys got cameras and using that. I'm curious, too. You mentioned you being deposed? Yeah. Yes. Disposed, like toss him out.
Matt wishes that I could be disposed.
But I'm just curious, what's that process like? How do you prepare for when events like that happen? I'm sure medium and larger fleets out there are always curious about this process.
Well, sure. I mean, something bad's happened if you're going to be deposed.
Right.
And, we're just trying to fact gather.
Yeah.
And the critical part about the deposition is that's really where they're trying to determine negligence on behalf of the company and what really actually happened. And so, when you're talking about risk management and the litigation side of it, as important as the regulations are your company policies. Because if you don't follow your company policies, you make yourself negligent. Yep. And, we always talk about innocent until proven guilty. That's the criminal standard, right? Well, the civil standard for negligence is known or should have known. So the question that we have to ask each other all the time, and Matt and I, we do this exercise. Hey, did you know or should you have known that this guy's a problem? Because if you have to answer that under oath,
yeah,
then guess what? We're going to be negligent. If we knew or we should have known that, we're going to be negligent. So we have to follow our own policies. Our policies have to be clear. There's an art to writing a policy that gives you a little bit of wiggle room.
Right.
We use very little wills and a whole lot of may, right? Very little we will terminate you if, and a whole lot of we may terminate you if. That way, if we decide not to terminate somebody, we haven't violated our policy.
Right.
So if we violate our policy and hire a guy that we say we won't hire, our standard says you must be, this is, for example, 22 years old. And we hire a 21-year-old. And he goes out and 5 years later, when he's 28, he's in an accident and he kills somebody. A good plaintiff attorney is going to say, you hired him improperly, and if you had followed your own processes, he wouldn't have been here to have this accident. And we can't really argue with that. It makes us negligent. So, you have to follow your own rules. Yeah. And that's like the real challenge with the whole thing. There's so many different things that can happen. And so when you're getting ready for a deposition, you get prepped and you know what's going on. There's certain things you want to know about, and there's some things you'd love to not be able to know about or hope that they don't answer. But you just have to be honest and not be intimidated, because you're going to get asked the same question 4 different ways.
Yeah.
Right. And your nature is, when somebody asks you that question over and over, well, maybe I'm not telling you what you want to hear, so you change your answer. You just got to give them the same answer. You got to give them the same answer. Remember, they're not there to help you.
Right.
They're not there to help you, and they're actually there to hurt you. So, you don't want to be combative, but you don't have to be, their friend. You just answer honestly because you're required to, but don't say anything you don't have to. Right. It's a challenge. It takes, and they have like an hours of service for that too. You can only be, I tell people this all the time, you can only be on the stand for 9 hours.
Interesting.
In 9 hours. I mean, all right, well, think about that. If somebody wants to browbeat you for 9 hours, that's a long time to have to keep your mind focused on something and straight. And they don't necessarily do that to the safety guy. They're going to do that to the driver.
Yep.
That's who they're going to try to get him to say something. They talk to me. They know all right, we're not going to trick him with this X, Y, or Z, but let's talk to this driver over here and see what can happen. That's who they'll go after.
Yeah.
You need high-quality drivers, and you need them on the road fast. We have developed a new hire program that will streamline your hiring process, all while meeting the FMCSA requirements with new drivers. From creating a new DQ file and CDL clearinghouse registration to initial MVRs and pre-employment drug tests, CNS will ensure new drivers are properly qualified before operating in a safety-sensitive position. New driver applicants will fill out a driver qualification file, which will include CDL clearinghouse inquiry, motor vehicle record, and previous employer inquiries. A qualification report will be sent to your management once everything in the DQ file checks out on the new driver. Pre-employment drug tests issued to drivers upon notifications, and results will be stored on an online portal. Results are back 24 to 48 hours upon collection. CNS will work with company management to create hiring standards based on MVR, driver experience, and insurance requirements. If you'd like more information about the service, please fill out the form below, and one of our trucking specialists will be in contact with you.